Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Tom Finn podcast. I am Tom Finn and this is my podcast where I interview / have a nice chat with creative industry people. And today's guest is Alan O'Duffy. Alan is a sound mixer and recordist, having worked on 150 plus TV dramas and 19 plus feature films. He has also recorded and mixed 3 US #1 albums and worked with artists such as the Rolling Stones, Paul McCartney and Eric Clapton. We discussed that, how he started in the business working on and mixing the original Jesus Christ Superstar album, while also giving lots of insight and advice for new and upcoming creatives. Alan is also releasing his memoirs in early 2020, so I'd like to think that this discussion is a taster for what's to come, so make sure to look out for that. We recorded this episode in Luton, my birthplace of all places, where Alan guided me to some sort of furniture warehouse store, where we set ourselves up in the tables and chairs room. So you may hear the odd people come in and out looking for some nice new furniture for their house, but it shouldn't be too distracting. Anyway, I'll be back at the end of the podcast to talk about some upcoming projects. But until then, enjoy this conversation with Alan O'Duffy.
First of all, I'd like to start by saying, okay. Thomas Finn, thank you very much for asking me to talk to you.
Oh,
what fun.
Okay. Thank you.
How kind of you. You're very, very generous with your time.
That's fine.
You and I met very briefly in university, where I came along and did some chatting for an hour at some point. I think it was 2 years ago.
It was around. Well, I knew that back then because you would start to mention things, but then I think you knew you were there for a reason to talk about sound things. So before you told any stories, you would then move on. And I remember sitting there thinking, no, I want to hear the stories. So I've always had that in my head. So that's one of the reasons I brought you
And
in.
Listen, I wish you well with your podcast concept.
Thank you.
And doing it, because a lot of guys in your position, if I may say, and ladies, are interested to know where on earth they can go with their interest in filmmaking and maybe interest in production and interest in media. Where and how can they monetize, which is a dreadful word, how can they earn a living doing that, something that's a passion for them and something maybe that's a hobby and now a degreed, they have letters after their names, unlike myself. Yeah. And you can go forward with you're an intelligent man who knows what they're doing when it comes to the idea of starting in film.
Right.
So that would be one of the reasons why I would enjoy it. Is there one fraction of something I can say that helps anybody? No idea.
Yeah, well, we'll find out.
We'll find out. Thank you, Thomas. I was born in Dublin, Thomas, and my dad was a singer, and he was signed up to HMV, which was the precursor to EMI Records. Okay. And he cut tracks in Abbey Road Studios, which at that time was called EMI Studios. He cut tracks there, and his contemporaneous people in with him would have been Vera Lynn. So my dad was an Irish tenor, and so I remember as a 7-year-old listening to my dad's white label test pressing, which was, and my mum was a musician as well, and the two of them would be talking about diction and melodic interpretation and arrangements and ambience and all these type of things and sibilance and so as a 7-year-old I was listening to ideas to do with audio. And then my dad used to tour and would tell me about PA systems and all that. And then I had a cousin called Gerard McHugh, great fella, and he ran at the music department of like a general store. So he sold turntables and records and so on. So and tape recorders. So my world was I was blessed to know about these things as a kid, really. And I was madly keen on music. And as the music business became more fascinating, as for a 10-year-old and in my early teens, I was really quite smitten with all that stuff. And I went subsequently into music production when I was 17. Imagine that.
Yeah. So were you in Dublin for very long? Or?
I left Dublin. We left Dublin because there wasn't enough business in Ireland for my dad, who was a solo artist. And he thought that the music industry, centered around London, as it did. It was London, Memphis, New York, not even Los Angeles at that time.
Yeah.
And then there was Deutsche Grammophon in Germany, who were fabulous for classical recording, but really the business of the popular music was really more London and New York at that time. And I had the pleasure. I left school without a lot of GCSEs. I'm sorry to tell you, but curiously, I managed to. I don't know. The word "blag" is the wrong word, but I managed to persuade the chap who ran Pi Studios, a man called Bob Auger. He allowed me to come and work for him.
Right.
And so, as a 17-year-old, I walked down the steps of a studio near Marble Arch at the time. It doesn't exist now. And had the pleasure of being what they call a tape operator, which is the lowest of the low. Okay. You're the T-boy and or whatever else that comes along cleaning cables. And one of the lowlights, the low highlights of that time was that I had to, when the band went home or the musicians went home, it's maybe midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, you're wrecked and you've been there since 10 in the morning the previous day. You had to tidy up. Now I wasn't the cleaner. I was the bloke with the microphones. Okay. Yeah. So I tidied up, but then I had to scrape the chewing gum off the floor at 2 in the morning. Right. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Before I went home, which I did, but it meant that I was, had the pleasure of working on some quite extraordinary records, which at that time were big time. Yeah. And I was the lowest. I was the lowest person in the room, but I was working on stuff that was extraordinary. I think at the age of 18, I started to work with a band called the Rolling Stones as a junior, Yeah. But it was the philosophy of how they worked and the way they didn't work that was the takeout. I would have paid to be there to watch how that worked, and I was paid to do it. How funny.
So what year would that have been when you started working with people?
Well, I started working in 1965 in October. And by 1966, I was working on an album called Between the Buttons, which was a Rolling Stones album. But curiously, and not to sound like a stuck record player, I had worked at that point with the Kinks, who were big time famous. And I also worked with a band called Spencer Davis, and the lead singer in Spencer Davis was Stevie Winwood. So I found myself fortuitously in the company of some quite extraordinary people making records. And what an honor, and what fun, and what a great learning curve. And subsequently, I was wanting to get to be the man behind the controls, or the man who's on the desk, rather than the bloke who cleans the floor at night. So I persuaded the man who was the manager of the Rolling Stones, or rather I got on very well with him. And his name is Andrew Oldham, and he liked I worked with Steve Marriott, a brilliant guy. Please look him up. Steve Marriott, brilliant. Worked with him, and Andrew. At that point, I was offered a job in another studio, and the other studio wanted me as a tape operator, as somebody to help other people, and I turned down the job in my arrogance. How funny! And but then Andrew Oldham rang Olympic Studios and said, "If you employ me," and I was known as Irish. How funny! Right. If you employ Irish, we'll bring all our work to Olympic Studios. So, Olympic couldn't turn down an offer like that, because he had a record label and called Immediate, and I went and worked for Olympic. And by the age of 19, I had a number one English UK hit record, which was with a band called Amen Corner. And the lead singer is Andy Fairweather Lowe, a lovely man. And that was called If Paradise is Half as Nice. So that was my first chink of making a very successful record.
I love that song. Yeah, it's one of those songs that I never know who's done it.
Yeah, Andy Fairweather Lowe. The band was Amen Corner. Right. And it's funny enough, it's an Italian song. It wasn't Andy's song. But Andy Fairweather Lowe went on to become Eric Clapton's side man, right, which means that when Eric Clapton's playing a solo, the guy playing the chords is Andy Fairweather Lowe. And a more wonderful and feet on the ground guy you would find hard to meet, you know.
Yeah.
So I had that was very fun, and I went on. And I did a lot of work then with a man called Jimmy Miller, and carried on working with Stevie Winwood in a band called Traffic.
Right. I like Traffic.
Yeah. I then started working with Slade, and I made every hit record that Slade made, right, except for Merry Christmas, Everybody. So
no, you missed out there.
Yeah, but it was fun.
Yeah.
And Noddy Holder has a voice that's slightly reminiscent of John Lennon, and we organized a man called George Scance in Olympic had this idea of a very fast repeat echo on his voice, which is what we did, which is what I did, and it gave it a sort of double track effect. It was called automatic double track ADT. How silly is that?
Right.
You know, but all of these records were made totally analog. There was no computer anywhere. There was no synthesizer anywhere. The whole thing was real music, real recordings, real microphones, and real space to make these things. And that's something I think that was part of my life. But now you can buy an app, or you can get a plug-in for let's have a large room. Click, plug in, done. Yeah. Or let's have that would be an echo effect, wouldn't it really? But let's have the sound of Doppler effect, or phasing, or whatever you want. Yeah. All of these things you can just all you need nowadays is a plug-in. But curiously, people like me, and I'm 71, we were the forerunners of all of that. And the only reason that, for example, that you would have phasing or ADT plugins is because we invented that.
Yeah.
And curiously, John Lennon, he didn't think his voice was very good. He wasn't impressed with his own voice, and he would always challenge the guys at Abbey Road to see what they could do in terms of innovative sound for the band. And Jeff Emmerich was a very fine exponent of having fun with audio and impressing John Lennon, where John Lennon would go, yeah, okay, yeah, whatever. And he'd be thrilled, you know. Yeah. But that was the story. So there was a sort of rivalry between us and Abbey Road.
Okay, there's a few things that I think I'm interested in with your life before we move on. Things, when I was looking you up, I saw that you worked on Jesus Christ Superstar. How?
And the rest.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, delighted. Okay, Jesus Christ Superstar was a curious and wonderful time of my life. I had already recorded a #1 American album called Blind Faith, which was with Eric Clapton and Stevie Winwood.
Right.
So it was a rock record, which was rather beautiful. Looking back and listening to it today, it's beautiful. It's a wonderful piece of work. So I had some cred. Also, I had essentially slept in the studio for 5 years. Now, that sounds an absurd thing to say, but I had worked 18 hours a day, or 12 or 15 hours a day, every day for 5 years before Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice walked into the studio, and I had something to say. I had some clue,
Right.
I'm not suggesting I had a lot of an idea, but I was somewhere along the line. Okay. And incidentally, I never regard any project, film or recording, I never regard it in a passé way. I never regard it in a perfunctory way. I always think, now hang on a minute. What are we doing? How can I do this? Am I going to do it right? Have I got the right kit? How can I do it brilliantly? I always do that. I never have the arrogance of thinking, I know how to do this. Yeah, I don't care. I'm just pressing the button, then I'm going home. It's fantastically rare if I feel like that about something. And more or less, if that's the way I feel, why am I doing it? Because the thing that motivates me, curiously and perhaps incorrectly, is the business of doing it right or doing something beautiful. And I'm not motivated by, well, I'm getting paid £100 to be here, to press a button, and I'm looking forward to the £100 because I'm going to, I don't give a toss. Yeah. I'm interested in, am I able to do a job that connects for the client, for the project, for the singer, for the artist, whatever it is. Anyway, Jesus Christ Superstar, right? I had worked through the night on a Saturday as normal, and probably got home at 6 or 7 in the morning, had cornflakes and went to bed. You see, it was just my normal mad lifestyle. And at lunchtime on this particular day, I do remember it, I was getting up to have dinner with my family, and I'm the eldest, so there was kids in our family, including my little brother who went on to work with Amy Winehouse. Thank you very much. Right. But so we got a phone call. There's no mobiles those days, so the phone rang, and it was Keith Grant who ran Olympic Studios. And Keith said, "Hi, Alan, can you come in and do this session?" And I said, "I just got out of bed. I want to have some dinner, and I haven't had a shower. Yeah. And it's 15 miles away, and I'm so sorry, Keith. I only, I'm wrecked, and I'm. Is it okay if I don't come in?" And so anyway, I didn't come in. And the thing that he wanted me to come in for was to work with Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. Right. You see, to do a backing track of a track anyway. So curiously, in the following week on the Thursday, my name was then on the board to record with Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. Okay, and what was I going to do now? It was overdubbing on top of what Keith had recorded the previous Sunday when I didn't show up. And the track was called Jesus Christ Superstar. Oh yeah, whatever. So, and it was the thing of recording a symphony orchestra on top of that. And there was a 60-piece freelance symphony orchestra walked in the door. Mm-hmm. And now I knew how to record a symphony orchestra, and I had been an assistant on other symphony orchestra recordings. So yeah, I wasn't an expert, but I had an idea. I had a clue. Yeah. So I recorded the symphony orchestra and then did the mix and loved it. And it was good fun. And I knew about perspective, and I knew about, trying to make something phenomenal. I knew about that. And I did it to my best. And it was a sort of minor hit. And funnily enough, John Lennon had a copy. Yeah. And it stirred a few people were interested in that. So 9 months later, my name was on the board again to work with Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice, because they liked what I did 9 months before. And we had fantastic pre-production, okay, as you can imagine, for a big project. And the fantastic pre-production was a piece of A4 paper. Yeah, okay. And the piece of A4 paper said, Andrew Lloyd Webber, Tim Rice, JCSS, whatever that is. Yeah, Jesus Superstar. Yeah. And right, what are we going to do? This is the pre-production: piano, bass, drums, and 2 guitars. Full stop. And I went, oh, so is this a big, huge concept album? I had no idea. It's just piano, bass, drums, guitar, piano, whatever. Yeah. And so anyway, so in the lads came, and they were wonderful guys. One of them was from Hackney, I know that. The other one's from Ealing.
Right.
Okay. Lovely guys. Lovely guys. They were mad keen sort of blues rockers or rock, guitar, piano. The piano player was the son of the people who ran Topshop. It's a guy called Peter Robinson.
Right.
And he was a remarkably good piano player. So these mad, lovely, really talented people walked in the door and they said, well, what are we doing? And Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. Andrew was a student at the time, and Tim Rice was, he had trained to become a lawyer and never did it, and instead ended up as an assistant producer at EMI.
Right.
So he knew Cliff Richard, which amused me. So lovely people. The guys were being paid double rates. They were being paid. So the normal rate to play on a record at that time was £35, and these guys were being paid £70. Right. Yeah. So Andrew Lloyd Webber went up to them and said, "Hello, we'd like to do. The first thing is here's the chords. Okay, fine. So and we'd like to do a riff. Could you play a riff? Keith Richard would do a riff. Make it sound like a rock type of riff. Yeah. Okay. Very nice. So anyway, these very laid back, long-haired, bearded wonders went, yeah, whatever. Okay. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do it. Yeah. What about that? How's that sound? Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah. We press the button.
You got me wrong. Don't get me wrong. You got me wrong. Don't get me wrong. You got me wrong. Don't get me wrong. You got me wrong.
Okay. Anyway, so there we are. And so I think it was 3 months later, and having spent £17,000 in the studio, and I came with the machine. I was the recording engineer. Now, when you have a load of musos in a room like that, and it would match with other parts of our world, if you have a load of great people and you're working with them, you're going to try your best to make sure that your bit is good. You're going to try your best, whatever it is, whether it's a student film or anything else. You're all going to launch in there and do as best you can. And I had a clue and worked with these Henry McCulloch, Neil Hubbard, Alan Spenner, Bruce Rowland, and Peter Robinson. I worked with them all to my best ability and as much interaction as we could get, and made sure they were happy and everything. So we made a record. We made a record together, and Tim's lyrics were fabulous, and it just went on and on like that. And really, it was just a series of backing tracks that we had no idea what they were. But what then happened memorably one day is that I had previously worked with a band called Episode 6.
Right.
And Episode 6 were a sort of folk rock band, but the singer in Episode 6, or one of the harmony singers in Episode 6, was a guy called Ian Gillan. And he had gone on to form with Roger Glover a band called Deep Purple. Yeah. And he was the singer in Deep Purple. Hello. Yeah. And so he walks in one day, we were doing Jesus Christ Superstar, and Ian Gillan walks in the door, and it was like hello mate, how are you? Yeah, great. I haven't seen you for a bit. Yeah, whatever. And Ian was a fella who looks not dissimilar to your good self, Thomas, with long hair and everything else. And he went over, and Andrew goes, "Oh, look at this song." Yes, I only want. Yeah. So Ian was an extemporization fellow. In other words, he was an improviser. He would sing what he thinks you asked him to sing. He'd sing what he felt worked. Yeah. He and I think a lot of us do that. We do what other people think, what we think they want from us, you know. So Ian anyway sang, and Ian happened to have a particularly extraordinary voice, which is called a passaggio voice, which means that he has his tenor voice and he has also his boy soprano voice. Yeah. So he can go from his tenor male voice straight into a voice that goes up to the heavens.
Yeah, like in Child of Time.
My goodness me, exactly. Brilliant. So really, Ian was what a pleasure to work with him. And I mixed the album. The only comment about, and the whole thing was all analog, and the only input I had from Angelo Dorman and Tim Rice on the mix, apart from that obviously they knew the running order of it, of course.
Yeah.
And I think we mixed it in running order, so that like a film, and if you're editing a film, you have to edit a film with respect to what's before and what's after, in terms of the dynamic and the shape and the sound and the feel and everything. So we mixed it like that. But I just tried to make it the most spectacular record ever, because that's what I did. Yeah. I'm interested in making things sound beautiful.
What would you say to people that are going into this world, this creative world, because you didn't do well at school and you've got to these places? So there must be something that you have that's not just, do well at school, do well at university, then you get your job, right? What was it, do you think?
Tenacity. I don't know really, Thomas, where it all comes from. I mean, a great passion, a passionate interest in doing something, in making something, in going somewhere. Curiously enough, I carried on. After JC Superstar, I worked with a left-handed bass player from Liverpool who used to be in the Beatles.
Yeah.
What a wonderful man, and a lovely wife, Linda. And we worked together in New Orleans and in Los Angeles. Then I went back out to Los Angeles, to Hollywood, and mixed and worked with a band called The Fifth Dimension. And then I came back in England and I worked with the Thompson Twins, and I opened my own studio, and, and it carried on like that. But when I was 40, the tide was going out on the business of making records. So right. I was fortunate and blessed enough really to get a gig with ITN, which is the Independent Television News, you see. And I went from recording symphony orchestras and the Rolling Stones, which I did a bit, actually. Yeah. I really did. To go from them to recording Margaret Thatcher walking through an art gallery. Hello.
Yeah.
And doing mad things like that. And I ended up working in the film business and television business. And I've worked on 30 something films, and I've worked on 150 something TV dramas, and I've worked in 30 countries, and I'm still alive. Mm. There you are. And I was recently rebuilt. My heart was rebuilt by a man called Mr. Neil Roberts, which is fantastic. So my clues as to what to do today if you've just left university would be, first of all, I give you all my best. Every essence of my body would say, listen, I wish you well, first of all. And secondly, I think that my interest in making things, in music in particular, and music mixing, stems from a passion and stems from an interest and a passion. That's the two things that drive me, not money, curiously. The idea of, wanting to do something beautiful, wanting to do something brilliant or mad or wonderful or loud or whatever. I mixed Come On Feel the Noise. I recorded and mixed Come On Feel the Noise for Slade.
Yeah.
That wasn't designed to be beautiful. It was designed to be loud.
Yeah.
And it bloomin' was. And it ticked the boxes, And I just so it went from being a sort of a hobby to being a passion, to being a profession. That was my route. Mm. And I think that's fairly good. That's good. Because we were talking earlier, Thomas, which is that, I never would approach doing any project, even tomorrow. And I was working this week and I'm working next week. I would never approach a project with a sense of blasé or a sense of arrogance. I'd always think, right, how can I do this really well? Is there anything I can learn from the last time we did this? Is there anything I can bring to the party? I would always try and do something beautiful. And also I would always try and do something where for you as an editor, Thomas, you're not going to be stuck with some audio or pictures. Whatever I'm doing with you, you're not going to be stuck with something that's not editable. I would never walk away from your shoot and say, good luck. I'd walk away and think, you've got everything you need, Thomas. You've got the bits, you've got the wild track, you've got the properly recorded audio, I hope.
Yeah.
And that would be my passionate interest in how can I work with you going forward.
It'd be nice to work with people who had that opinion as well. The amount of films and projects I've worked on that end up being good luck with that. It's all up to you now kind of thing. It's frustrating. The passion goes away at that point,
Well, you see, just out of interest, say you were kind enough to ask me to work on a project with you next year. Okay.
Right.
And you said, and you and your friends had worked out some script or a feasibility or a concept or whatever it is. Okay. And you've probably been working on it for a year. Okay. With respect. All right.
Yeah.
And after a whole year, you've managed to get together the camera, the kit, maybe some distribution, whatever it is that you need. And you get to the point where we're on day one, scene one, slate one, and off you go, press the button. So you've been kind enough to drag me in to give you a hand, and or my colleagues, whatever. Now, my interest at that point is not called, oh, right, I'm making, £200 or I'm making anything and, I'll get it at 6:00 because then I just have to go through the day. That's not my interest at all. My interest is called, right, first of all, respect, Thomas. You've done all this pre-production stuff and you've ended up in the position of saying, Alan, will you give me a hand? And so I'm there out of huge respect for you and your energy and all your time that you put up to make it possible for me to walk in the door in the first place, you see. So that's called responsibility and respect. And therefore I would my criteria is, can I give you, Thomas, whether I'm camera or sound or helping in any way, can I give you something that means that you as an editor or whoever you're getting to edit has the product they need to deliver the story, the concept, without any messing. And that's my interest. And if something isn't good enough on a set, I will tell you, like if the artist mumbles or I can't understand what the artist is on about, even though I've got the script in front of me. If I can't understand and I'm looking at the script and I still don't understand, how on earth is somebody in Australia going to understand what you've just been you've written,
Yeah.
So I would make a point about that, but I would only make a point to the director, for example. I wouldn't go straight to the artist, but that's sort of to do with decorum on a set. So that's what motivates me is the business of trying to do something really well.
Yeah.
Try, whatever it takes. And then stand behind it. Because if I'm enjoying it, then you'll enjoy it.
Well, I think as well, something I've learned more recently is that I'm at a stage now where I finished my education, I finished film school, I moved to a different place, I'm working as a barista, and I'm making the podcast, right? I think there's
fantastic.
There's different periods in your life that learning that you can let things go and move on to different things is something that's important, I think.
Here. I had the particular pleasure recently of 12 years ago, hilariously, 12 years ago, somebody said to me, a lady and her husband said to me, "Oh yeah, you'd love a certain course, okay, training thing." And I went, "Yeah, whatever." And I couldn't afford it, and I just thought it was maybe salacious, and I thought I was being very judgmental, but I thought it was maybe what they call BS. Okay,
right.
So I didn't go along. But curiously enough, a long story short is that I went on the training course this year, and I still had all the prejudices in my head about, maybe this is rubbish. Maybe it's, immoral. It's this, that, and the other. And I thought, we'll see. But so many clever people had told me that I'd enjoy it. A chemist and a lawyer and a doctor. And they all said, you'd really like that. So anyway, I went along. And curiously enough, it was brilliant. Absolutely. But my point is that, as you were just saying, sometimes we have to look outside our own immediate life experience to see if there's a potential for development and for learning and for see where we go. I mean, I'm being completely ridiculous, but say, Thomas, if Greenpeace say, well, we want a filmmaker to help us look at the situation in the Arctic, would you care to sit on one of our boats with us with a camera and see where we go? And you probably think, oh no, it'd be freezing and I'll miss my girlfriend and what about my parents and my dog and you'd have a list of things which would be negatives.
Right.
But it could just be that you'd be the man who'd come back with a film that was like, excuse me, this is what's happening in the world, this is what's happening in the Arctic, and you could change public opinion with your work, and you could deliver something that was heartfelt and passionate, which is what you're doing. So look outside your own realm, your own immediate family, and social parameters to see if there's a world there that maybe could do with you, and why not?
Yeah. Do you enjoy the traveling part of working in film and TV and things?
I absolutely love it.
Right.
I absolutely love it. I tell you why also. I mean, there are people that I know who go, oh, I've got to go up to Manchester tomorrow. Yeah, whatever. And I've got to go to... Yeah. But I mean, all of these places have history, and all of these places have something to say to us in some world, so I'm continually charmed by the pleasure of going somewhere and finding out something that I didn't know yesterday.
Yeah.
I think that's a good attitude to have as a filmmaker person, as a production person.
Yeah.
It's good to have an open agenda on the world. I mean, for us, and more particularly even for you, Thomas, as a young guy, why not just be enthralled by life and by what people have done and where people have go and history and architecture and, compassion and also other people's lives. I met a lady recently, and I didn't even know her name, and she looked like she should have been on stage singing "Beat out that rhythm on the drum." Beat, she looked like an opera singer person.
Right.
But and I told her so. But I mean, you just what my reason for saying that is that sometimes you just meet people and you think, hang on a minute, how did they tick? How did their world work?
Yeah.
And there's things that we're on a never end, that the person who comes onto your film set or your production or your podcast show and says, oh yeah, I know everything. Been there, done that. Yeah, I know all the answers. Yeah, not, because we're both on the same journey.
Yeah.
And I hope that I continue on that journey for a good while yet. As somebody said, it's terrible getting old, but it's the alternative is much worse.
Yeah. Are you happy with the life you've led then, and the things you've done, the choices? Has there ever been a time where you think, oh, I wish I said yes to that, or I wish I said no to that?
Listen, I've had a privileged life, to be serious, okay? And I've been privileged to work with some extraordinary people, and I've been privileged to fulfill my dreams in terms of guys that I've had the fun of working with. And so we always have, I think regrets are part of the human condition. You always think, oh, I wish I had done that last year. I wish I got whatever. Yeah. You always think like that, but really just enjoy where you're at. And I could have done things different, better, whatever. One of the things I regret just very slightly, I don't care, but a friend of mine was a guy called Vic Coppersmith Haven, who produced, I think, The Clash. Okay. Right. And he came in listening to my mixes of Jesus Christ Superstar. I remember he came in, he was not somebody who gets impressed at all, but he was going, this is rather good, Alan, and and it was. And he said, say to them you want just half a point, half a percentage, or just want something. And I didn't, because I was, in my madness, I was more orientated towards, can I do the job well, rather than the business of, can I make money out of this? I wasn't sort of money centered. Yeah. I think interesting things for us nowadays, and for you as well, Thomas, is to sign up to something like QuickBooks. And I think it's free, or it's a $5 a month or something, whatever. Right. And QuickBooks is a spreadsheet. It's a online cloud-based software for accountancy. So as a young man making podcasts, you should be able to stack up a load of invoices for going back since you started the podcast, so you can say, well, I earned £1,000, but it cost me £500 in petrol and subsistence and kit and batteries and So I really commend getting your act together when it comes to accountancy. That's really very important. It's never been a strong point of mine, but I've recently been playing with QuickBooks, which I love. So I do recommend, students and yourselves to get your head around the business of invoicing and how you do it and how you how you organize a bank balance and because it's serious, because we all have to live, It doesn't matter how passionate you are about something. We all have to live, basically. It's not funny. Yeah. And another thing is amusing, and that is a question for you, Thomas, which is, how many years have you been, how many years were you in university, first of all?
University would have been 3 altogether.
Right. So 3 years university. And now how many years before that were you interested in sound, television, making films, So
I had been studying it since 2012. So I've been about 7 years studying it. Right. And then interested in it since I was probably 4.
Okay. So could I say, 10 plus years easily, So for 10 plus years, you've been a passionate man concerning the business of making stuff, making films, making sound, doing stuff. Would that be reasonably accurate?
That sounds fair to me.
Yeah, it's fair. Okay. So say you make a video with your local doctor's surgery. Okay. Right. You made a video for them. Why not? And say they say, well, and say it takes you 3 days, 3 days, okay. And they say to you, well, and they have the money, curiously, okay. Yeah. So it's taken you 3 days to make something that is based on 10 years of interest and study and university and hard work, okay. So so when you invoice them, you are not invoicing them for 3 days or 2.5 days, whatever it is. If you go 2.5 days times £100 a day, right? Well, can I charge them £250? Not sure. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. You're not charging them for that. No, you're charging them for 10 years of experience and motivation and direction, right. and consideration and collaboration. All of that goes into the one package called you delivered a product to a local client. And so have it that you charge them for real, because and I had this story was my story long way back, which is that I did something for somebody and it took me a morning. And I said to the fellow, well, how can I charge you? It was only half a day, And he said, well, how many years have you done this? And I said, oh, it's 7. And he said, well, you're charging me for the 7 years that you've done this, because do you know how long it would take me to do that? It would take me 3 days to do what you've done in half an hour. Yeah. And so that was a good clue. It was a good thing to learn. Yeah. Called, value your life experiences to date and do it. I think, first of all, thank you very kindly for asking me to talk to you at all, that's Thomas. Okay. What fun. interest currently, or one of my big interests at the moment, is the business of climate change.
Right.
And I think that this is a crucial factor in our lives, and in more in your lives than in mine.
Yeah.
It's very, very serious. And, amusingly, 30, 40 years ago, I was interested in conservation, and I bought an old house that was in a bad state, and I put aluminium foil on the walls,
Right.
To keep it warm. And then I put double glazing, which was considered, and I did all sorts of stuff to try and make it a more eco-friendly house, which it became. And I'm just trying to say that, so that was my interest going back a long way.
Yeah.
And I'm just wanting to say that I think that as young filmmakers and podcast guys and editors and writers and producers, I think the story of and the business of how can we make this world a better place is the most important story on the planet. What is it that we can do as a collectively, as society, as brothers, as friends? What can we do to make this place a better world? And, I think looking at the business of climate change and mitigating climate change is perhaps the most important story of all. Mm. And what is it that we can do together? And if you can bring your film and audio and production skills to that question, I think that would be time well spent and wonderful for society, And there are all sorts of outlets for your talent. And one of them, for example, would be Centre for Alternative Technology in North Wales, CAT. And they're, they'd love your company, and if I may say, Thomas. And but there's loads of people who are interested in this alternative, slightly alternative and progressive thinking towards saving the planet. Yeah. The planet will be all right, but it's called saving mankind is the big question. And when you look into the eyes of young people and kids and everything, you just think, hang on a minute, what's the world going to be like in 30 years, in 20, 30, 40 years? What's going to be happening? Mm. And that's the thing that concerns me enormously.
Okay.
And if you as young filmmakers and film experts can bring your focus to that, I think that would be fantastically good.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Alan O'Duffy. Again, if you did enjoy that, make sure to look out for his upcoming memoir in the new year. Talking about the new year, this is the last episode of 2019. But please go back and listen to the previous 7 episodes if you haven't already. I have some more guests lined up in the new year, including rapper Wes Strong and writer and director Eva Riley. So look forward to that, as well as some other projects that I have planned. If you can rate, share, and like the podcast, that would be great. Thank you to Toby Morgan for his graphics, Danny Young, Luke Perrett, and Tom Harrison for their music. All you guys for supporting the podcast, and until next time, bye.